Welcome back to my channel, guys. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you the best and worst books that I read this year. My reading goal this year was to read 20 books, and I read 26, which is crazy. I'll start off with the ones that are bad and go to the ones that were good because I want to end this on a positive note. The first one that I did not like was called The Turn of a Key, and it's by Ruth Ware, and I just did not like this book at all. I rated this book 2 stars, and I will read you my review that I left this book. I was not a fan of this book at all. I didn't like the format being a letter from prison. There was a lot of cussing. Most of the book was slow, and there was barely any action with the ghosts. The whole book had a negative vibe. Rowan and Maddie's characters are frustrating and annoying at times. There's a constant pattern of something happening, then they forget about it, and then something else happens. The first 3/4 of the book are very predictable, and then it starts to become less predictable towards the end. There's barely any suspense until the last 1/4 of the book. There were several plot twists towards the end that seemed irrelevant and pointless. There were many unnecessary turns, and there wasn't a central focus or main idea. It was very repetitive throughout the whole book. Rowan asks questions, and nobody ever seems to have the answer. Throughout the book, there are many unanswered questions that should have interested me, but didn't. Finally, the end was shocking, but very frustrating. It's nothing against the author, it just wasn't my type of book. Maybe I should have read one of her other books. So I was recommended this author as like a really good thriller author, and I just it just wasn't my thing, in my opinion. I guess I should have started out by reading what this book was about. So it says, when she stumbles across the ad, she's looking for something else completely, but it seems like too good of an opportunity to miss. A live-in nannying post with a staggering, generous salary. What she doesn't know is that she's stepping into a nightmare, one that will end with a child dead and herself in prison awaiting trial for murder. So basically, it's a ghost story about this nanny living in a house, and the house is basically haunted, but you find out that it's not actually even haunted. Sorry, that was a little bit of a spoiler, but I was very, very disappointed in this book because it's like the last couple pages are suspenseful, and it's the plot twist is not even good. You think it's ghosts, and then it's not even ghosts, and it was very frustrating in my opinion. Next one. Can't Hurt Me. This book I was recommended from a YouTuber, her name's Renee, and I was really excited for this book because of how hype everyone makes it, and a lot of people might really like it, but I just personally did not really like it. For David Goggins, childhood was a nightmare. Poverty, prejudice, and physical abuse colored his days and haunted his nights. But through self-discipline, mental toughness, and hard work, Goggins transforms himself from a depressed, overweight young man with no future into a U.S. Armed Forces icon and one of the world's top endurance athletes. The only man in history to complete elite training as a Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, and Air Force Tactical Air Controller, he went on to set records in numerous endurance events, inspiring Outside magazine to name him the fittest real man in America. In Can't Hurt Me, he shares his astonishing life story and reveals that most of us tap into only 40% of our capabilities. Goggins calls this the 40% rule, and his story illuminates a path that anyone can follow to push past pain, demolish fear, and reach their full potential. I rated this one 3 stars, and here is why. David Goggins is an incredible human, and the things he went through in life are things I couldn't imagine. That's something that I really admired about him. He went through a very tough life, and his story is very inspiring. There were a lot of general messages in this book that I think a lot of people need reminded of. Some of the challenges directly related to me and the struggles I've had to walk through. I like the 40% rule that he talks about, and I feel like this will help me when I'm working out to push past my limits and expand my capabilities. To this day, this rule has really helped me push past my capabilities. It was a slow read for me, and I did not end up finishing the book, however. The chapters are very long, and it's hard to find stopping places. I didn't relate to his story, which is why I had a hard time connecting with him. There is a lot of cussing in this book. I can understand a little cussing to get the point across, but it was too much. It became repetitive around the middle of the book, and some things he says are a little harsh. A couple times he brought up his new wife or children out of nowhere without explaining any of it. I feel like if he mentioned his wife or children, he should explain at least a little bit instead of just randomly stating it. I understand that wasn't the point of the book, but why only mention it? One of his key concepts is that the human body can endure a lot of struggling. Yes, the human body can endure a lot of struggling and challenges if you're willing to go through severe injuries. So he talks about like pushing yourself to the literal last limit of your body, but then like he talks about all the injuries that he faced, like after pushing himself. And I'm like, why would I want to like struggle on earth with all these injuries when I can like live my best life without having to do that? I get what he's trying to get across, but this is very unrealistic. I skimmed through the last few chapters. Again, he is an amazing person, but this book wasn't for me. I just think that it's very unrealistic, and like he talks about like being successful as an athlete and stuff, but then he mentioned, but he wasn't there for his family. And I was like, yes, you might be a successful guy, like, and you might prioritize fitness over other things, but like, personally to me, I would prioritize my family and stuff over being the #1 athlete in the world. The next one is Down a Dark Hallway. I'm just gonna read you my review for this one because that pretty much sums up the whole book. It's basically about this girl that goes to this, like, school for kids, but it's only, like, a few kids, and they're all basically brainwashed, and, yeah, so here's my review for that. The beginning was super creepy, and I got demonic vibes from it, which I don't like. Most of the characters at Blackwood are crazy, and the book takes an unexpected turn that didn't intrigue me. There was definitely a level of suspense, but not my favorite. I can handle murder mysteries, but the vibe of this book makes me uncomfortable. The suspense picks up the most in the last 2 chapters, but it's like literally the last 2 chapters. Why wouldn't you pick up the pace earlier than that? Every Last Secret. This is the next one. I gave this one 2 stars. All of these books that I'm saying are bad, I gave 2 stars. The David Goggins book, I gave 3 stars because that one actually did push me to work harder as an athlete, but other than that, I was pretty disappointed in the book. I think I just didn't like it as much because it was so hyped up, and like, it didn't exceed my expectations. Every Last Secret is basically about this couple that moves in next door, and it's basically just like these 2 women fighting for what each other has. And I'll just read my review for this one also. Reading the beginning of this book made me angry. William is a coward. Nina doesn't know the great things she has in her life, especially her husband. She's literally crazy and very full of herself. The author characterized rich people as real snobs. I felt like I was reading a secret rivalry and I couldn't really get into the plot. Despite this, the last 100 pages are intriguing. You learn a lot about the characters that are unclear throughout the book, and you realize that some characters are smarter than you think, aka Kat. The ending is by far the best part of the book, but it's a shame it took that long to get to the good part. I originally planned to stop reading halfway. I don't like books that pick up halfway through, if you can't tell. Like, I like books that start from the very beginning and intrigue me, and the plot is moving quickly. I love books that, like, from the beginning are very interesting. I've never read a book that physically made me angry to read, which was very strange because during this whole half of the beginning of the book, I was, like, angry reading it. And, like, I don't want to feel that at all. I will say the end is very interesting, but the beginning is just not my favorite. The last one is Killing Mr. Griffin. This is the same author as Down a Dark Hallway. I do really love some of her books though, so it's a shame that some of these like aren't the best. Anyway, this book is average. Nothing too special about it. It's not as interesting as other books because the title gives away the entirety of what happens in the book. It's literally about killing Mr. Griffin, so like, you know the whole plot before you even start reading the book. There were only 2 moments in the book where I felt suspense. It was emotional for me when Mr. Griffin's character starts developing and you get to see the insides of his life. The author left a cliffhanger about who David's dad was and why Mr. Griffin had his ring. The ending didn't do it for me. I was expecting something way better. It was just bland. Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. Now I'm going to go through the books that really interested me and that I absolutely fell in love with. The first one is Beautiful Lies. This one is just amazing. Basically, this girl named Ridley Jones saves this kid on the street and her whole life flips upside down because people start, like, contacting her and thinking that she's someone that she's really not. And it's a murder mystery. It's an action-filled book. It's just everything wrapped up in one. I definitely recommend it so much. This book gave me a roller coaster of emotions. There's passion and sadness, suspense and mystery. During the whole novel, there were a ton of questions that pop up that slowly get answered throughout the book. You can come up with theories of what you think is going to happen, but I guarantee it will most likely be wrong. The suspense is sometimes creepy and too realistic, and not gonna lie, gave me a few nightmares, but overall, it always kept me wanting to continue. The love story between Ridley and Jake is inspiring. There were a few unanswered questions by the end of the book, but I think there is a sequel. There is a sequel. The sequel is not as good, but it's still worth the read. The beginning of the sequel is really slow, but then it picks up again, which, like, isn't my favorite, but you kind of have to read the sequel. The ending is very beautiful, and it makes me happy that the characters were finally mostly set free. When you read the prologue and the first chapter, you're going to be very confused, but push through and read it again after you finish the book. It will make a lot more sense, and there are a lot of hidden clues to the plot. When I was first reading the book, I had to question a couple times if I was reading a true story. That's how realistic it seemed, as if a real person was writing from their experience. It was a little slow at times, and I was debating on whether to give it 4 or 5 stars, but I think it deserves 5. If I could have given it a half point, I would have rated it a 4.5. The next one is Locked in Time. 4.5 stars. I love the plot of this story. I never wanted to put this book down because of the suspense and tension. It is a quick and easy read. There are some overdramatic and cliche parts. I find the relationship between Nora and Gabe to be a little strange due to their situation. Lisette is also the most selfish character ever, which makes the reader more involved with them. The last chapter is depressing, but happy at the same time. I felt a lot of emotions. This one is basically about a girl that her father gets remarried to this woman, and she has 2 kids. I don't want to say too much without giving it away, but I definitely recommend reading the description and reading the book. Next one is the Sundown Motel. This one I actually bought someone for Christmas this year because I really wanted them to read it. This one I also gave 4.5 stars. It's basically about this girl that tries to figure out how her aunt got murdered because her aunt is, like, missing or something, and she basically tries to relive her whole aunt's life. This book is very good and mysterious. It can be confusing sometimes due to the switch between Carly and Viv, so it is written from 2 different characters' perspectives, so you really have to pay attention to, like, what character is narrating, and the characters that it switches between is the aunt, which I'm pretty sure is Viv, and then Carly, which is the niece. Sometimes it's unclear which character knows what information, and some things get repeated several times, which makes it more difficult to put pieces together. However, it's clear the repetition is intentional to make sure that the reader is aware of specific clues and details. Sometimes you have to stop and think about where each character is in solving the murders. The suspense in this book is incredible. There are so many twists and turns despite the fact that some results are obvious. I couldn't put it down. This was the perfect mix of murder mystery and ghost story. The next one is The 5 Love Languages. I had no idea about love languages, and I'm so glad that I read about them because it helps me understand people so much more. It basically talks about the 5 love languages, which are physical touch, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and words of affirmation. The order for me is quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation, gifts, and then acts of service. I have been really curious about the love languages for a while. This book really helped me identify people's love language so I can love them more effectively. I love the quiz at the end of the book that helps you determine your love language because I wasn't sure what mine was at first. It's amazing to learn about the process of love and how we can all be loved in different ways. Definitely recommend reading that book. Last but not least, we have Outdated, which was honestly probably my favorite book that I read this year, if I'm going to be honest. It's basically a Christian book about relationships and, like, dating and, like, singleness, engagement, dating, marriage, the whole spectrum. Literally every single dating video that I've watched on YouTube about like advice is in this book. And even if you aren't a Christian, I think the advice in this book is so good because it talks about how to not play games. A lot of people play games with dating nowadays and it's really annoying, and so I definitely recommend reading this book. JP is very honest and straightforward. He also includes footnotes of comments in scripture that relates to what he is saying. This book is a perfect guide for singleness, dating, engagement, and marriage. Everything you need to know is here. It's super simple and gives direct steps for different situations. And it also gives like advice about what to look for in a spouse, certain qualities that you should look for, like red flags, and it also talks about the importance of singleness and how like you really need to chase after the Lord in singleness and just let the Lord work through your life and allow you to fall into his hands and allow him to intersect people into your life that will eventually be your spouse or whoever. That is all that I have for you guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you guys have any book recommendations for me, please leave them down below. I love reading so much. And I'm so excited for the new year and all the new books that I'm going to be reading. And if you have specific thoughts about the books that I talked about, definitely let me know what you think about them, or if you like disagree with anything that I said. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Have a blessed day, guys.